Good evening, my name's Alex Campbell and you're watching the first episode of Examining Cinema. On this episode, I'll be examining Ridley Scott's neo-noir sci-fi spectacle, Blade Runner. Now there is a slew of Blade Runner reviews on YouTube at the moment because of the hype around the new movie Blade Runner 2049. And I want to try and do something a little bit different in this review. I'm not going to run you through scene by scene, tell you what I like, tell you what I dislike, focus on tone or characters or atmosphere. What this review is going to be about is the production of the film. I'm going to run you through how the movie was made and everything that happened in the creation of Blade Runner.
Ridley and I decided to see this film before we showed it to Tandem on our own. So we sit there, the lights go down, and we never said a word through the entire film. And when the lights came up, Ridley said, "I think it's marvellous, but what the fuck does it mean?"
Before I get into the production of this film, I want to talk a little bit about how I've seen it, what it means to me, and what I think of the film. Now, growing up, the films that made me get into film were the original Star Wars trilogy and the original Indiana Jones trilogy. And I started religiously watching these trilogies when I was about 10. I even had an Empire Strikes Back VHS that I watched so much that the tapes started to disintegrate. And when I was about 16, I came across this sci-fi film with Harrison Ford in it, and I'm like, what? What is this? There's another sci-fi film with Harrison Ford in it? And I watched it, and it was different. I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't expect what happened. In my mind, this film is exactly what I want. Neo-noir, grindy, slow atmospheric drama. I don't want to see another fun action adventure. I want to watch some dark, grindy shit. Now, my source material for this video will be the 2007 3.5-hour documentary Dangerous Days, the making of Blade Runner. So if you're interested in this review and what I say and want to learn more about the production of this film, go watch this documentary. It's well worth a watch. Hampton Fancher wrote the first few drafts of this film, obviously inspired by Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and this film doesn't really encapsulate that book. It's not really a accurate telling of that narrative. It takes little aspects of it and uses that world that it's set in as a stepping off point from a different story, really.
In 1975, someone gave me some money. They pitied me. They said, you gotta do what you want to do, and here's some money. You can go away and write. And so I did. And it didn't work out. I just thought I would produce a movie. And this guy, Jim Maxwell, is a close friend, and he knows me well, and he said, I said, I think science fiction's gonna happen.
Hampton shopped around his original script to a lot of the big studios, and they all passed on it. But eventually, after a few more rewrites, it was picked up and the film had a footing. Originally, the scope and scale of Blade Runner was very small in comparison to what the film turned into. It was like a one-room movie, like a character drama, examining these people in this future world. But it wasn't until Ridley Scott stepped into the role of director for this film that it changed, and Ridley said, what's out the window? What is this world? Let's explore this world.
This was a small movie. That's how I wanted to do it. It's rooms, strange movie, but it's, face-to-face movie. People are talking. And I had this dream of actors, like the right kind of actors, director.
Ridley Scott was originally going to do David Lynch's Dune before David Lynch was attached, but unfortunately his brother died of cancer, which means he had to step back from that project and take a break. And he'd already passed on Blade Runner at that point, but in his revelations and him having a break, lamenting on his brother's death, he reread the script and said, "Hey, I'll give it a go."
To be faced with, a brother dying of cancer, and then to die, it can often, I think what happened is maybe the lack of control over that kind of created a darkness.
So due to the fact that the scope and scale of this movie skyrocketed once Ridley was attached, the original money allotted for this film was not going to be enough to see it through. So the studio had to get a bunch of financiers to step on board and back new money to get this film to where it needed to be. And they added an extra $7 million onto the budget if it was going to go over, time-wise and shooting-wise. And they got a lot of rights from this, rights which they probably wouldn't have had if they didn't have to do this last moment.
Tandem Production was a company that Norman Lear and myself started probably 15 years before Blade Runner. What happens is that they come out with a budget. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, the budget was $1 million. And if they started to go over to $1,200,000 or $1,300,000, whatever it would be, there had to be somebody that would put in that completion money, that would pick up the $300,000 that they were over.
From the beginning, Ridley had a massive part in the art production of this film. Look at this picture that Ridley actually hand-drew himself. Ridley and Hampton worked side by side, and Ridley was throwing ideas back and forth to him, and they started to get into disagreements about what the film was and where it should go, and unfortunately Ridley fired Hampton.
Let's talk about it and see what to do. I always like to keep the writer on, the original writer.
This is difficult in a way because Hampton been in it from the very start.
Without him there would be no Blade Runner. He was the person who came up with the idea and pushed it and wrote the original drafts and everything. This is really sad, and I feel for Hampton.
And he says, "This is the new script." And I said, "What new script?" And he told me. He said, "There's David Peoples." I said, "Who's that?" I couldn't hear anything. I was standing in my cell. I stood up because I was going to cry. I just was like, my whole world fell apart.
What's anybody going to be? Incredibly hurt because, what he'd written was fantastic. Suddenly to have somebody else come in and take over your baby.
There's a bit of a redemption story in this though, because Hampton wrote the script for Blade Runner 2049, which is really great, and I like the fact that he had a chance to step back into this world and he got to live out this world that he created that was taken away from him.
What were some of the roadblocks that you hit in order to get this thing a green light and actually get it off the ground?
Oh, the roadblocks were, I think it was when we finished the first one, within a year, we were talking about a second one. Ridley called, I was in New York, I went out to LA, and we batted stories around, and nothing came of it because of legal problems.
Now the opening scene of this film was going to be the Blade Runner coming into this house and seeing a pot on the soup, and shenanigans ensuing. I'll show you the storyboarded scene now.
He's got to go retire an earlier version. And he said, "I see like a cabin, on the stove. There's like a pot, and there's soup boiling in the pot." That was it, man. I loved it. Soup boiling in the pot. And I just went home and I just started writing.
Now what's really great about Hampton stepping on to do the new script for the new film is that he reused that scene for the opening of Blade Runner 2049, and I just love that. When I watched it I was like, oh, that's the original opening scene for the original Blade Runner. It's just a great little Easter egg which I really enjoyed.
A guy in farmer overalls comes out, goes into the house, sees Deckard sitting there, ignores him, walks into the kitchen, starts stirring a big pot of soup. Says, "Do you want any soup?" Deckard doesn't say anything. He says, "Who are you with anyway?" This guy's stirring. Deckard gets up, says, "I'm Deckard, Blade Runner." Boom, he kills this guy for no reason, just shoots him. And you go, what is going on? And then as the guy slumps against this wall, falls to the floor, Deckard reaches into his head and pulls his lower jaw out. And you see that it's an aluminum construct with an ID number.
For a long time, Dustin Hoffman was going to be the lead role in Blade Runner, which is really weird, and what ended up happening after months and months of him being the man was he kept on pushing his ideas and his themes and what he wanted, and Ridley and the producer said, this isn't really our vision, it's changing, we don't like it anymore, which is when Harrison came into the mold.
Fuck it, it's just a movie.
But that would be a far different movie with Dustin Hoffman.
He came in, because he was always a weird dresser, this guy. He was a big man, and he was wearing a puce nylon jumpsuit with one piece zip up.
A Kenzo sweater that had a big fox across the shoulder with 2 red eyes. He had already cut his hair in the way he thought Batty should look, which was the short pointed blonde hair.
And he was wearing green, floral, kind of Elton John sunglasses.
We're so happy you found us.
I could literally see Ridley's heart stop.
What? You literally could see Ridley's heart stop? Did you call an ambulance? Did you have a heart attack? Did he die? That's what happens when people's hearts stop. They die. It's this great moment where the actress who plays Pris talks about all the actresses coming in, and they got the creative freedom to create this character and create the wardrobe and how this character was going to be and act, which I think is a really cool way to create a character.
Everybody who was screen testing got to create their own character, had days to meet with the makeup team and the wardrobe team. And I remember I had found that wig in a basket full of stuff, and it looked cool, and then kind of built from that. And I had seen Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, and I remembered the sort of puttied out eyebrows and the black circle, black hollow eyes of Klaus Kinski. They had a big dinner set on a soundstage like they do on movie lunch breaks, and I actually went in for that, and that's the first time that I got to see the other girls. And Monique Van de Ven looked like a doll, and she was all like sort of beautiful nude doll woman, and I was like a freak.
I think that this was a really good idea, and they should do it more in films. Get the actors' input into the role before filming even starts and see what they have to offer. Also, Edward James Olmos, who played the character Gaff, created his own language for the city-speak of like the mass globalized world of Blade Runner. Actually spent his own time studying languages and how they worked. It was a mixture of German and Hungarian and Japanese and a few other languages apparently. And apparently he says horse dick in Hungarian when he first comes on, his first opening shot, which is pretty funny.
And I have heard that when Blade Runner plays in theaters in Hungary, there's an enormous laugh.
Lopa, nehoćma, te vaja play Hakan. He say you Blade Runner.
Sid Mead handled the design for a lot of the cityscape in this movie, and really he is one of the reasons this film is so great, just as much as Ridley and Harrison and Hampton. He was only hired to design cars, but he didn't want to do cars in a sterile background, so he just drew his idea of the cityscape in, so Ridley told him to jump on, and it's really his design which created the Blade Runner world.
And I had never done an isolated object on a white sheet of paper, because that's not the way things exist in the real world. They have surroundings, in situ. So once I designed Sebastian's truck, I have it sitting on the street. It's not being used. Behind it is a building with sort of this patched over screened windows.
Also, another contributing factor as to why the production of this film was so grand was because there was an actors' strike for about 9 months. So in pre-production and building all the sets and cars and props and costumes, these people got 9 months to work on it, which is unprecedented, really. It's just lucky happenstance that happened to happen, and this movie happened to have that edge. Also, Ridley played a massive part in pushing the art direction crew further and further and further. He developed a few of the original sketches for ideas, and I have to say that Blade Runner and Alien have some of the best production and art design of any films ever, and it's just great to see a craftsman who's pushing so hard and pushing all these people to do their best and work harder, and what can I say, it really pays off. So of course this movie goes over budget and over schedule, and the finances step in and pay the money to get the movie finished and kind of hold Ridley ransom. But day one, Ridley steps onto the set, and these massive columns, which apparently he sketched out for them, are upside down. So he says, alright, you have to flip all of these columns the other way around. So day one, shot one, they're already pushed back.
He basically said, well, the only thing I'd like to do is turn the columns upside down. And I looked at him incredulously, like, what do you mean, turn them upside down? And he said, just that, put that down here. I said, okay.
And the columns are not supporting the ceiling, but they're just big bastards. I said, look, without damaging the floor, how long to cover the floor without scratching it? Turn each column over. He said, you won't be shooting until 12 o'clock.
I went to the first AD, told him, this is at 7 in the morning, come back at 2 o'clock, and we'll be ready to shoot. The director wants a change.
Harrison Ford was also massively disillusioned while filming this movie. He hated the rain, he hated the smoke, and he hated filming every night, all night, for months and months and months.
Fuck it, it's just a movie.
Apparently he just stayed in his caravan and would only come onto the set to film his parts, and he was just there for business, and once he was done and his job was over, he'd leave. He didn't interact with anyone very much, including Ridley.
Harry was never happy on that show. He never was. Not really. The only time he was happy was if it was going to be close to wrapped, you know, then he was happy.
Fuck it, it's just a movie.
So when the movie starts to go over budget and the schedule starts to get pushed out, the finances step in and start to ask Ridley why he's making so many takes and why he's taking so long and why can't he just do 2 takes of one scene.
I remember Ridley heard that they were upset at the number of takes he's done once when they were watching dailies, and Ridley got very angry, and in retrospect I think Ridley was sending a message back to them in his own way. He was having a tantrum and stuff, and I think he was letting them know, don't fuck with me.
And he and I sat actually a couple of times, and I say, explain to me, because I don't quite understand it. Tell me why this 16th take was the best one out of this whole group.
You don't need to understand, just provide the money and let the artists make this movie. There's also a lot of tension on set between Ridley and all of the crew. He was an English director and they were an American crew. And there are a lot of differences back in the 80s with English and American crews.
Everybody already anticipated before shooting, oh, he's not gonna like us. He's gonna be unhappy with us because he thinks American crews are not good. I don't think he really sat there and said, I don't think American crews are not good. He wanted everyone to be at their best.
Even a point where they wore these shirts, which was having a dig at Ridley.
And so I did what was called the T-shirt wars.
And Ridley wore a shirt saying, xenophobia sucks.
Please explain.
He said, well, xenophobia means fear of strangers. And basically what's going on is these people don't understand you and don't understand the way you work.
Apparently that broke the ice and relieved a bit of the tension. But it's amazing that this film was pushed to the point of the crew and director having such animosity against each other that they were wearing conflicting shirts, digging at each other. That's insanity.
And said, right, morning Harrison, we're going to do this. And there was this. And there's all these people standing there in their shirts, which I completely ignored. I didn't say a word about it. And they ignored me. We got on with the first scene, with all of us wearing this ridiculous gear. And about mid-morning, this T-shirt started to disappear. By lunchtime, it was all gone.
A lot of people also have a problem with the chemistry of Decker and Rachel, and there is no chemistry, and they don't believe the relationship, and I can understand that. Harrison didn't want Sean Young to play this character from the beginning, and when they got onto set, there was just no chemistry between them. And in their love scene, Ridley started to just come up with stuff, and he's like, push her against the blinds, and she got a bit weird and thought it was getting too violent and started crying. So this was Harrison's solution to cheer her up.
And I remember Harry going to the side Like, I was sitting on that ledge where the blinds were behind me, and we did the scene, and he went over to the corner there, and he turned away from me, and he took his pants, and he mooned me, because he's trying to make me laugh, because I was going, and I looked up, and he was mooning me, and I think I started laughing, you know, and I think what he was trying to say was, you know, hey, it's not that bad, kid.
Yeah, Harrison, that's great. Girl feels like she's getting raped, so moon her. It's also this beautifully unscripted moment where Pris runs into Sebastian's car and her elbow smashes through the window. That wasn't meant to happen, and it was real glass. An actress still has glass chips in her elbow to this day, apparently.
I ran and hit the van, and my arm went through the window, and it wasn't breakaway glass, so I still have a scar. It's a little bit keloided, so you can see it.
So the financiers got so upset with Ridley that he was going over budget that they started coming onto the set and waiting to the side while he was filming, straightening their ties, and they take him aside in the lunch break and just hammer him. Why are you doing this? Why are you taking so long? Finish it up. And apparently Ridley he didn't take any. He just kicked ass and was like, I'm doing this. This is my film. You want me to create a quality product? I'm going to create a quality product. Step back.
I didn't have much to do with them and didn't see much of them, I know, till we started getting behind schedule. And I know Bud Yorkin was the guy, you know, who used to come down on the set. And in particular, I remember one night when we were shooting, which was a, you know, difficult sequence, Zora getting shot. And I remember Bud Yorkin was down there just wanting to know expletives apart, why we were going so slowly and what the hell, you know, was going on, and pointing his finger pretty aggressively at Ridley.
I respect Ridley very highly for that, you know? A lot of other people would have just been crushed creatively by these suits and ties fucking with him. But he didn't. He took it into his stride and he fought them.
He'd just keep going whatever he was doing, and they'd say, well, you know, we're going to have such and such a meeting, whatever. Then we'd break for lunch, and you'd see them all go in, and everybody going, that's it, they're going to tell him, they're going to shut down, they're going to shut down, they're going to shut down. And I used to think, I knew it. I used to always tell myself, I never said anything. And you'd see Ridley go in, and he'd come out, and it must have been like a 12-round punch-up, you know? But he came out. He wasn't budging.
Due to the long hours and the constant night shoots, a lot of the cast and crew were at breaking point and hated this film. A lot of them walked off, and they were just constantly replacing people behind the scenes. And I just want to show you an interview with Rutger Hauer and his opinion on this.
I'm sorry, but you know, sometimes our work is grueling, and I don't think PR is there for, you know, to whine about, oh, you know, it destroyed my life and it was so grueling. It was a tough shoot. We were doing something very special.
I think that's great. It's like, yeah, it was hard, the long hours, but we were creating something special. Shut up and do your job. If you were like a gaff or a sound guy though, I guess you wouldn't have picked up on that or cared. You just would have been like, this fucking sucks. I'm getting a new job. See you later. The iconic scene of Decker hanging from one of the rafters was an accident as well. The stuntman was meant to actually make the jump and land on the other side perfectly fine, but because they wet him down, his clothing became much more heavier, and he got halfway and was like, I'm not gonna make it, and had to jar his arm out and grab onto that beam hanging off. And then Ridley was like, that was great. Do it 6 more times.
Every time I'd have to hook my arm, I had a big bruise under my arm, but, you know, we made the jump.
The jump that Roy Batty makes was actually Rutger Hauer too. One of the stuntmen tried to do it and failed, and Rutger was like, Ridley, give me a shot. And by this time, Ridley was running out of time and was just like, sure, go, go.
And then, you know, we did one take and I jumped.
Rutger just did one big bargy hop. He went with a dove in his hand. Because he came to me and said, I thought it's simpler pieces, is this okay? And I'm going, yeah, go on. The light's getting blue.
Also, the iconic speech at the end, Rutger Hauer wrote that for his character as well. That's crazy. And the idea of him having the bird, the original script was far less emotional, and he came in and was like, this is my death scene, and what he wrote was amazing and beautiful and one of the most iconic moments of this film and of cinema in general. What a great guy. Good job, Rutger.
I came up with you know, 2 lines that I had some sort of off-worldly feel to it and some poetry in it. And then I came up with the line, at 4 o'clock in the morning, all those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. And I brought it to the set and really liked it.
The dove also got soaked with rain, and the symbolic shot of it flying off, symbolizing his death, didn't work because it just hopped off his lap and casually walked off. So the filming got to the point where Ridley had 2 days left and the finances were going to cut him off. He'd gone over schedule time and time again. And they were limited by time with these 2 days because obviously they only shot at night time. So the sun's coming up, sky's starting to turn blue, and the financiers are standing there just waiting to take the film off Ridley.
We were really, really dying. We were absolutely in the water here, swimming with the sharks around us. And I knew by then, be now April, May, June, I got dawn coming in. 4:45. So it's going to go blue. It's going blue. In fact, it's beautiful light because it is blue. That's dawn.
Incidentally, after the filming, they fired Ridley and the rest of the crew and wanted to re-edit them themselves. A bunch of assholes. You're just fucking bureaucrats. What the fuck do you know about film?
I think Bud secretly wanted to direct it himself. And if he had, it would be obviously a very different movie. There was conversations like that led nowhere because we stood by Ridley and said, "You got to finish the movie. That's what we bought. That's what we're paying for."
Anyway, the sun started coming up and Ridley wasn't finished, and he was so determined to get the ending scene right that he got the crew to get chainsaws and cut the set out from where it was attached and drag it into a studio so they could make it look like night so he could continue to film. The bureaucrats were just standing there like, "Give us the film." Ridley's like, "I'm not done. I'm gonna finish this film and make it right."
Michael Dealey came over to me and said, "Listen, you know, we got to keep going." And so what we decided to do was literally take chainsaws and sawzalls and literally cut the set out of the street and put it on vehicles and forklifts and move that set piece with the rooftop down to the stage.
I just have to respect Ridley's determination. This is just such an odd turn of events for the making of a film. It's incredible.
But we were not aware of what was lurking in our mailboxes next day, which was a communication from the lawyers representing Perenchio and Yorkin, invoking their right, since we were 10% over budget, to discharge us from the picture. In fact, it was funny, I don't know why they did that. I know they had the right to, and I think it was done out of pique. I think that Perenchio was so cross with us because he'd had to pay up on his guarantee of completion, for which he was being paid $1.5 million, that he wanted to punish us.
After the financiers fired Ridley and everyone else and tried to edit it themselves, they decided that they were being assholes because they were being assholes. So they rehired Ridley to help out with the special effects shots and the editing. This film was one of the last big budget special effects movie made in the analog world, before the immersion of digital CGI and computer effects and all that. All the models and lighting and matte paintings and sets is impeccable, and it looks real and it looks great and it stands the test of time.
It was plain old-fashioned filmmaking with C-stands and gaffer's tape and running the big 65mm cameras.
Actually, by the time they got to the special effects, they're running so low on money that this opening shot, which is impeccably beautiful, it was actually really creatively made because they didn't have a lot of money. All these little models of houses are just 2D cutouts, and then they put the fire in for perspective because it was only like a 10-foot little set. It's just incredible.
So the Hades landscape is what's called a forced perspective miniature. You have larger little miniature elements in the foreground, smaller ones, and smaller ones, going all the way back to the horizon.
The use of lens flares also came out of the creativity needed due to the lack of budget, just to make the shots more interesting and invoking.
At the end of every pass, we'd make a long pass with that bright light there. And as soon as we put that light in there, it just blew everything away. It solved the technical problems, but more importantly, that thing became magical.
Started chucking stuff into the cityscape to make it look more cluttered because I had no money, and the Millennium Falcon is actually in one of the shots.
No budget for something, you can't build something else, so you borrow it. God, you just throw it in there. If it looks okay in the distant and lots of smoke, and hey, let's do it. Just put it in there.
We grabbed other things that weren't even buildings. Spaceships from another movie with a bunch of antennae and stuff glued on it.
And apparently there's a kitchen sink somewhere in there. I don't know. So once they got to editing, they were really confused and they didn't know how to pace the movie. They didn't know what they had or if what they had worked.
But what the fuck does it mean?
Had the finances over Ridley's shoulder saying, hey, cut out all the subtlety and ambiguity. Stuff like the horse scene in the final cut they just didn't understand because, you know, they're assholes.
To this moment, when he comes flying through I had no idea what was it, nor did anybody in the film. I don't know now. When they run his cut, you look at that and you say, well, what does that unicorn mean?
You're an uncreative bureaucrat. That's why you don't understand. Stick to counting beans and not sticking your nose in art. Now, in the original cut of this film, there's a terrible voiceover. And this was tacked on at the last moment because they thought the people wouldn't understand this film.
He had nothing to fear from Bryant, but a lot to fear from me if he'd killed her. I don't like that. Let's start again.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that bothered you?
No, but
I thought you said that was getting in your way.
No, sir, not.
I'm sorry, I heard you wrong. Go ahead, then.
There are a lot of people that like it with the voiceover. And as a matter of fact, maybe because they're friends of mine, the majority of the people that I've shown it to like the version with the voiceover better than the director's cut with the voiceover out.
You're an idiot. The voiceover is just really jarring and was done behind Ridley's back once he'd left the production. And Harrison was contractually obligated to do these voiceovers, and he didn't want to. He hated the idea from the beginning. So his performance is really flat and emotionless and broken.
The final versions of the narration were done without Ridley, and I missed him.
We all went to London to do the cutting, do the post-production, and when we were away, that's where they sneaked in.
This guy sums up the voiceovers.
Right at that moment where I'm like at my emotional crescendo as a viewer, here comes this thudding, dunderheaded voiceover.
I don't know why he saved my life. Maybe in those last moments he loved life more than he ever had before.
Maybe I guess in those last moments he appreciated life more than ever before. Yes, I know that. Thank you.
Tacking something on for stupid people who don't understand this film when it doesn't need to be there. If you don't understand it, you don't understand it. Move on. Watch Terminator 5. Was it also a horribly tacked on happy ending where Decker and Rachel drive off into the sunset and everything's gonna be okay? Because they thought that the film was too dark and people wouldn't like it, so they were just like, yeah, we'll tack on a happy ending. It looks horrible and it's bright and in daylight and out in like a serene forest. The shots are from The Shining. It doesn't fit with the tone of the film at all.
I liked everything except the last scene, the driving off into the sunset. Didn't buy it, didn't believe it. Looked like it came from another movie to me.
Vangelis is the composer of this film, and his music really makes it. You imagine any of these scenes without this dark, brooding, emotional score, and it'd be a completely different film.
When I would arrive, he'd go, come, listen to this. And he would actually say, watch. And he would actually play physically what his recording was. And as he's doing it, he's looking at me, and he's doing that. And it was watching this evolution of this great music.
So this film was marketed as an upbeat action movie with Harrison Ford, right off the back of Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And it didn't do well at the box office because it wasn't that movie at all. It was slow and thoughtful and deep and said something about humanity. There are also a lot of other big movies around the time of this release which crushed it.
You have Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, you have Poltergeist, you have E.T., John Carpenter's The Thing, Conan the Barbarian, The Road Warrior, Tron. I mean, you even had Rocky III.
Even though this film didn't do well at the box office, it began to get a cult following and it just became beloved and became a great film through rewatches and all the many re-edited versions of the film. It stayed alive and stayed present, and it created this whole subgenre of sci-fi like Ghost in the Shell and Matrix, which are heavily influenced by Blade Runner. In conclusion, through this movie's troubled production, it managed to get a footing and become an amazing movie, one of the best sci-fi movies of all time. It didn't do well at the box office, but that didn't stop it. It kept on re-emerging, and it stands the test of time. I absolutely love this film. I can sit down and watch it any day of the week. It's not boring to me. I don't care that the story isn't too in your face and too detailed. It's not about that. It's about the themes and the social commentary and the atmosphere and the tone. Thank you for watching, and it'd really help out if you could like, subscribe and comment. Good night.
Fuck it, it's just a movie. Fuck it, it's just a movie. Fuck it, it's just a movie.
Please explain.
Fuck it, it's just a movie. What?
Please explain.
Fuck it, it's just a movie. Fuck it, it's just a movie.
Please explain.
Fuck it, it's just a movie.
Please explain. Please explain.
Fuck it, it's just a movie.
Please explain.
Get the fuck out of my house.